Welcome to One Leg Up, where we discuss how you can deliver the very best customer experience and how you can achieve zero marketing waste. I'm Ed Davis, the Chief Operations Ninja here at OneLeg, and today Vic and I are going to discuss one of the hottest topics raging in home improvement right now, the one-call close. Before we do, Vic, as ever, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Ed. How are you? How's Texas?
It's hot. It's not on fire like it is there in California, but it seemingly is just as hot. Thank you for that. Vic, you've been in home improvement for a really long time. You've worked with a number of organizations. Before we get into the idea, fully the idea, the pluses and minuses of the one call close, how ingrained is this concept within the industry, and where does that concept actually come from?
Well, it's not only in home improvement. I think there's many industries that embrace this concept. Many companies that do.
Sure.
Many companies don't. Over the years, there's been this debate, and it's continuing to rage on. But I think now, it's time to call a winner, and there is a winner. In terms of the history, the one call close was really born about by the fact that many years ago, before the information age that we live in now, before the internet, right, before your ability to be able to go and purchase items and research them with your mobile device, people lived in small communities, and the only way that they would be able to go and find out about goods and services would be with traveling salespeople going around to town to town, knocking on doors, not doing presentations or demos. They'd have if it was a horse-drawn carriage, to maybe in the 50s and 60s, when you had traveling salespeople in the back of their car, they had these vacuum cleaners.
Really, for encyclopedias. I remember the encyclopedia guy
right?
coming to the door. Yeah.
Correct. And really, when you're traveling, you don't want to be like keeping your product in the back of your trunk and then going back to headquarters, trying to explain to your manager why you didn't sell every single one of those products that you've been lugging along throughout. So they really, I think this was born out of just it just
necessity,
makes sense.
Right? Necessity.
To them, it just made sense. Look, I'm not coming back. It's very transactional. I'm not here to build any relationship. You have no choice other than to listen to what I have to say if I'm the salesperson. And all this information, very hard for you to verify. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go make sure that on that particular engagement, you buy. I'm going to close. I'm going to go and sell something. And the consumers really didn't have until, again, now the difference is, if somebody said something to you, you could literally go to your phone, sense check that. Yeah, go to Wikipedia, go to Google, and it'll tell you, right, whether what you're being told is the truth or not. So I think that's really where the history comes from. It cool. Comes from a point where people didn't have choices
and access.
Yeah.
Cool. And as with everything, there's always going to be pluses and minuses, right? And on the plus side, of course, just as you've talked about, if a salesperson is adept at a one call close, it is super efficient for the home improvement company and for the customer. Assuming the salesperson is being honest, they get all their questions answered, they get the negotiations out of the way, and ultimately, very quickly, they can get into their project and get that done. And that's a benefit, right? Because we are a society now that's increasingly in a hurry. But at OneLeg, of course, we are building our organization on the idea that everything is meant to be challenged for the betterment of what is best for the customer, right? And in this instance, I think that when you have the mindset of a one call close ingrained in your sales team within a home improvement organization specifically, and as you've talked about previously, it's not just home improvement. It's in a lot of industries, but we're talking about home improvement because that's where most of our customers come from. But when you have that mindset, it's got a ton of drawbacks nowadays. And I don't think that homeowner or home improvement company owners actually think about them. I think, you talk about in some of the mastermind stuff that we put out recently about lead addiction and things along those lines. And that's really where it's born from. So let's talk about the 2 or 3 major drawbacks we see as an organization to the one call close concept, if we might, right? And so at the very top of the list, What do you think is one of the biggest drawbacks?
Yeah, and I wouldn't even I will say that I take a more dimmer view of this, that it's not just a drawback, but it really destroys the concepts that you could call the best practices or what would be appropriate for this day and age. I would even go as far as just saying that the one call close is inappropriate because of all the elements that it forces you to do, which kills relationship and all of these things, and I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yep.
If I were to go and just pick on random, something that I would say stands out quickly in my brain right now, it would be the fact that it really is unrealistic, and it's really, I wouldn't even call it a philosophy at this point. It's really just this methodology that's so archaic that that people continue to train on, so-called sales gurus and organizations, and they peddle this because this is how they make their money, right, through sales training programs. And the problem with this is that they're perpetuating basically this concept or this philosophy that was appropriate maybe 50 years ago to some degree, and it's just not the same now. It's basically operating in 1950s America,
Mm,
when you're in 2021, and we all know that that the world has changed, America has changed. The things that you could do in 1950s, I mean, you're going to get into trouble if you did some of them now, right?
sure.
And I think a lot of companies are getting into trouble because of that. They've been getting into trouble for many years. It's time now to take a stand and get away from it. When you have a one call closing uh, program or mindset or philosophy, what you're really saying is, I'm going to ignore all the data, all the things that are pointing to a much better customer experience or user journey. And you're basically saying the consumer is not important. I don't care what the market says. I don't care what the consumer thinks or what they experience. What is important are my goals.
Right.
And we've seen how companies who take this very dim view, and a very narrow view of the world, how they've either come crashing down or they've shut their doors over the years. Because again, it's good to think that you can monopolize a market, but nowadays it's a consumer market. Consumers have so many choices. The experience is of paramount importance, and you've seen that on how companies like Google and Apple have come up with updates to
Sure.
to, to really be an advocate for the consumer. And I think the one call close, if it was ever alive, it should just die immediately, and you shouldn't use it anymore.
Fair enough. And so I think yes, but I think the more, I think the harder realization people need to come to grips with, and you and I have this ongoing debate, and you come from this world in home improvement of sales and call centers and structure and honestly one call close concepts, right? I come from an agency background where the agencies that I've worked with, brand was paramount, brand reputation was paramount, relationship that you build with your clients or your customers is paramount. And so I think that's a really interesting balance that we bring. And it's funny to me when we talk to some of our prospective clients, you can talk to them about sales, you can talk to them about marketing and advertising. The minute you start talking about brand, eyes start to glaze over, and they rarely do they really consider that as one of the things that they need to preserve, one of the things that they need to protect, one of the things that needs to be foremost in the front of their mind when they go out and engage the community. But to me, you know you give your reasons, some of your prime reason why it should go away. To me, the prime reason is it's a brand killer, right? And we talked about this with canvassing also a couple episodes ago. But a one call close, especially in the hands of a goal driven, quota driven salesperson, it sets up your business for failure from the standpoint of, think about, if you get a bad review as a home improvement organization, we really should do a survey of this, because this is just my gut feel. But the vast majority of our clients, when we see that they get bad reviews, it almost always, 80% of the time or more, is because the salesperson, right? The
That's right.
salesperson was hard tactics. The salesperson wouldn't leave my house. The salesperson told me told me this, but in actuality I got that. The salesperson didn't give me the right pricing. The salesperson wouldn't do this. So to me, while that is detrimental because it starts to bring down your social proof, your ability to say, "Hey, I'm a great company," I translate that into brand degradation. And I think more and more home improvement companies, smaller ones, the big ones certainly do, right? The mega brands that you see their logos and stuff, and Home Depot and Lowe's and stuff like that, they're absolutely thinking about their brand. But it's the smaller, it's those, the $500,000, air HVAC contractor in, that little town in Iowa. It's the $10 million window company in Florida. Those people need to be thinking about their brand just as important, just as much as any of those big box Fortune 500 companies that think about their brand. Because if they don't, they will. You add that bit in, the fact that it isn't as efficient as people might think that it is, the fact that people have all this access to information, you'll find yourself out of business really quick.
Or you'll just get dominated. And the reality is that, again, you just put it this way, right? 1950s mindset, thinking about it from in a way where a lot of companies have really not been thinking about, people have a phone in their hand, and I can research you really quick and figure
Yep.
out, and it only takes 2 seconds for me to see one bad review about a salesperson. I'm not going to quantify that because I'm lazy and I'm bombarded with so much info and I want something quick, and I'm gonna move on to a different company, right? It all takes that one bad review, and it happens to be the thing that I saw about the experience with the salesperson. And I think, again, I want to I want to put this in context as well. This is a leadership and a management issue or a
Yeah,
training issue. It is not a salesperson issue.
it's
Salespeople
fair.
are caught in the crosshairs of this. They're really collateral. They're experiencing the collateral damage of what I would say, being from this industry. If you're not evolving and you're not changing with the times and you're not improving on that, that is born out of laziness and ego, right? Because again, I'm going to bring it to this concept, to this philosophy. What you're saying is, this is more important than me looking at the data that shows that, if you look at the studies, because there have been studies that have been done
Sure.
over the years here. For example, in 2018, Google launched a huge study across the country. The Pew, and what they found was, across the nation, 96% of training, it basically goes to waste, and a lot of it was based on sales, for example, because one, it's never quantified. I mean, just think about this, right? The people that they're so-called sales gurus, they're not scientists, they're not researchers. None of their pneumatic, 3-step, 8-step programs have ever been put through the ringer of research or studies or scientific, empirical based methodology. So everything that they're really trying to teach, right, is based on assumptive, kind of homegrown experiences that cannot be replicated and cannot be backed, right? And then you look at the data, right? So every year they come up with, the home improvement sales and demand and marketing, and you'll see that, marketing outweighs sales by over 8x, for example, right? There's 8x being spent on marketing than there are actual revenue being generated each year from sales in home improvement. That simply tells you that there's no way to do a one call close effectively, because it's the fact is, people cannot make that decision, or they just won't make that decision right on the spot, and it does take some time. And there are people, when you generate marketing, those are mostly curious, they're not necessarily serious, right? And we've
Sure.
coined this term many times now. And I think really I like the fact that you brought in this brand side. There's this misnomer that, oh, in B2B it's acceptable to have follow-ups because the sales cycle is different. Well,
Yep.
you're dealing with humans. People can't
Either
forget
way.
that
Yep.
either way, humans are humans, whether it's B2B or B2C. You're dealing with a decision maker. And the reality is, when home improvement, depending on the product, but average tickets could go from, $2,500 in HVAC to $30,000 in a bath or a kitchen, for example. People just don't make those decisions because you made a presentation and you followed 8 steps, and now you're asking for the order, and okay, yeah, that's that, you're going to make that decision just because I did the presentation based on this philosophy. I don't think so, and it's just never happened.
Yeah. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly there. So then let's make the final point, right? And so you, I love the way that you're protective of salespeople, and you've put a lot of this, the idea, the concept of a one call close, right at management's feet, which I love, right? I'm damn the man got kind of guy. So I think the other thing too that people need to think about, at least internally, if you do have a one call close mentality, a mindset as an organization, what is that doing to your sales team? What is that doing to your call center, right? To me, it sets unrealistic goals. Your attrition is going to be probably higher than you'd like, and so there's knock on costs that you're probably not necessarily accounting for. If you are sitting there looking at your analytics and it says, well, that guy or that person closes, the one call close concept a third of the time, that other person is a tenth of the time, and you go and get the natural law of averages. You're constantly going to be turning over a certain number of your salespeople because they're just not going to perform. And if you're doing that, you're constantly having to train them. You're constantly having to get them up, up to speed on things. What is that doing to your organization's morale? What is that doing to your organizational resources that you could actually put into building those individual relationships with homeowners in your community and growing your business in a more deliberate fashion that has benefit for the homeowner and the customer, has benefit for you as an organization, because you will still make the close. In fact, you'll probably make a higher number of closes because of that approach. And oh, by the way, the dark little thing that you don't really want to talk about, your brand is going to flourish in that, because people are going to say, I loved my experience with that company. They treated me like a human being. I don't feel like they were just trying to generate an invoice to me. I appreciated that experience, or I like what it is that they're doing in my community, and I fully endorse that. So I think that's the third thing that people really don't think about, is what you're actually putting your sales and your marketing teams through when that's your mindset.
And I make this analogy where ideas versus beliefs, and it's not bad to have ideas, because ideas could change, and ideas could spur other great things. And so you could have an idea, a goal, as salient as, I'd like to get a sale today, but I'm probably not going to, and all the data points out, we have an idea. But beliefs are hard to break, and you think
Sure.
about how beliefs in terms of religion, right? I mean, you could go to someone who's a Catholic, and you could make the most scientific, argument that's backed by science and everything else. That says, hey, this is a better religion, for example. It's not going to do you any good, because a belief is hard to break, and you basically just follow that blindly through faith. And if an organization kind of has this religion of one call close, everything goes out the window, even though there's science, there's data, and all of that stuff, because you're basically going on blind faith. So that's one, right? I'd rather have an idea of it rather than a belief, which a lot of organizations, that's their
Sure.
belief. One call close. Two, it's interesting how I like the way that you put that, with regards to how the relationships are with salespeople, and really what you're doing is you're training them not to go and see the relationship that they can build and the blue ocean of opportunity that they're missing on, because let's face it, that is what they're held accountable to. In this industry, it's not unusual to see 10 to 20%, net closing ratios, which means 80 to 90% of the time they're not selling on the first call, on the first visit. But yet salespeople are compelled to basically just go to the next client, because they're chasing that belief, right? And they're being held accountable to that. And so the 80-90% of the people that they're not selling, it's almost like, well, I'm not trained to follow up. I'm trained to close.
Right.
You see, and I think this concept that I kind of thought about was companies who have a one call close. They're trying to do more with less instead of doing more
Sure.
with more. And that really should be the shift here. Is that you're trying a one call close. I'm trying to get my 19% closer to 20%, that 1%, and it's infinitely harder to do that. Whereas if they focused on the 80-90% of the customers that don't close in the first visit, or in the first call, they'd have a bigger opportunity to increase their aggregate close rates, right, and their relationships with clients. So I really think that at the end of the day, attrition rates that you talked about, whether you're closing on appointments, demos, or sales, or selling your product, your services, it, it it's hard enough to be in sales, and we can all agree that without the one call close, attrition rates in sales positions are already high. I think it's an element that just exacerbates and kind of perpetuates a vicious cycle. And it needs to stop. It needs to go away. And I think that salespeople would actually stay in their positions, be happier when they are actually being trained to go and do what they do best, which is really build relationships.
Yep.
Salespeople, good ones and the ones who are learning to be good, they happen to stay in sales and be in sales because they're people. They're people oriented. They love people. The one call close simply destroys any of that opportunity, and I think it's an opposite to the you could call it the personality of a salesperson who really wants to build a relationship, who wants to think in longer terms aside from that 2-3 hour window that they have with the client.
Sure. Right. Well, this is stimulating. I have a feeling this is going to come up as a topic of this podcast, certainly our blog, on a more frequent basis. But we're gonna park this conversation right here today, and that's it for us. We hope you've enjoyed our chat and learned a couple things. As always, we here at OneLeg believe poor marketing pollutes the planet, and that business is full of tired, outdated, indistinct, unremarkable, and underperforming marketing that sucks. But what sucks even more is that many companies have forgotten the most important thing of all, the customer. We're on a mission on behalf of our clients' customers to change that. To learn more, go to zeromarketingwaste.com, where you can subscribe to our blog and this very podcast. You can also find us and follow us by looking for the Flamingo and the OneLeg handle wherever you socialize online. Thank you, everybody. Talk to you next time.